You know, if we're honest with ourselves, there's a pattern many people carry quietly, one that doesn't announce itself with drama, but shows up again and again in the same familiar disappointment. We meet someone new, we feel the spark, we tell ourselves this time will be different, and then slowly we realize we're reaching for someone who keeps their heart just out of reach. Most people overlook this because it feels personal. It feels like bad luck, like poor timing, like another near miss in a world already crowded with them. But beneath the surface, there's a deeper truth at work, one that has less to do with the people we choose and more to do with the stories we learned about love long before we ever had the language to question them. We're living in a moment, especially in these years after 2008, where connection is everywhere and closeness feels rare. Apps promise intimacy with a swipe. Independence is celebrated as strength. Vulnerability is treated like a liability. And somewhere along the way, emotional distance became not just common, but attractive. In the mid 2020s, people are busier, more self protective, more curated. We're told to keep our options open, our guard up, our needs minimal. And in that environment, emotionally unavailable people don't always look unavailable. Sometimes they look mysterious, focused, ambitious. Sometimes they look like freedom. But here's the quiet paradox: what draws us in isn't always chemistry, it's familiarity. The heart has a memory longer than the mind. And when unmet needs from childhood go unnamed, they don't disappear. They echo. A distant parent becomes a distant partner. An unpredictable home becomes an unpredictable relationship. Not because we enjoy the pain, but because some part of us is still hoping to finish an old story with a better ending. That cycle carries a cost. Anxiety rises as we wait for texts that don't come. Energy drains as we over explain our worth. Loneliness settles in, not from being alone, but from being unseen. And over time, what began as longing can harden into self doubt. I've sat with people who ask themselves why they keep choosing the same ending with different faces. They weren't broken, they were patterned. And patterns, once named, can be changed. What's required is not blame, but courage. The courage to pause, to notice the pull, to choose therapy over tolerance, reflection over repetition. It's the woman who journals her worth after another's silence. The man who decides that chemistry without consistency is no longer enough. Families who model emotional availability through honest conversations, teaching children that presence is not optional. As awareness grew, so did language. Attachment styles entered everyday conversation. Research helped people see that attraction isn't random, it's informed by history. Culture began to shift from, why do I have such bad luck, to, what am I being invited to heal? That change didn't remove the pain, but it did remove the shame. And shame is what keeps cycles alive. When people believe they're defective, they settle. When they believe they're learning, they grow. There's an ethical tension here we can't ignore. We ask individuals to do deep inner work in systems that profit from distraction. Apps reward detachment. Myths celebrate being strong and silent. Convenience sells speed, not depth. But character shows up in choosing presence anyway and rejecting crumbs for something whole. This matters beyond romance. Trust is the muscle of community. Availability practiced in private shapes, leadership in public. When people learn to show up emotionally, they listen better, lead better, disagree without dehumanizing. A society comfortable with vulnerability builds bonds that hold under pressure. The consequences ripple outward. Unhealed patterns repeat across generations. Guarded hearts raise guarded children. But when one person breaks the cycle, stability grows. Homes strengthen, futures widen. Emotional security becomes not a privilege, but a promise. So, if you found yourself asking why you keep attracting emotionally unavailable people, maybe the better question is this: What part of you is ready to choose availability for yourself first? If this reflection resonates, share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else see their own pattern more clearly. And if you want to keep exploring these deeper truths together, subscribe and stay with the conversation, because when you look closely, the pattern isn't accusing you, it's inviting you. It's asking you to notice what you've been rehearsing without realizing it. We don't chase emotional distance because we enjoy the chase. We chase it because at some point, distance felt normal. It felt survivable. It felt like love with the volume turned down just enough to avoid disappointment. I've learned, both watching others and sitting with my own reflections, that the heart is pragmatic. It chooses what it knows how to manage. If closeness once came with volatility, absence, or conditions, then a part of you learned to equate safety with restraint. You learned to earn affection, to wait, to interpret crumbs as promise. That lesson doesn't disappear when you grow older. It adapts. It dresses itself in adult language. They're busy. They're just guarded. They'll open up eventually. And before long, you're doing emotional labor for someone who never learned how to show up. I've seen this dynamic play out far beyond dating, in leadership, in workplaces, in public life. When people fear vulnerability, they manage rather than connect. They optimize rather than listen. They stay impressive while remaining unreachable. There's a cost to that. Trust doesn't form in the absence of presence. It forms when someone stays. When they answer the hard question instead of changing the subject, when they show up consistently, not just convincingly. Breaking the cycle starts quietly. It doesn't announce itself with confidence. It begins the moment you stop chasing clarity from someone committed to ambiguity. The moment you choose curiosity about yourself over persuasion of another. The moment you decide that your nervous system deserves calm, not suspense. That decision can feel lonely at first. Growth often does. When you stop tolerating distance, some connections fall away, not because you've become demanding, but because you've become honest. And honesty rearranges relationships. This is where community matters. Not advice shouted across the internet, but spaces where stories can be shared without judgment. Book clubs where people admit what they're learning the hard way. Faith groups where presence is practiced, not preached. Friends who don't rush to fix you, but sit long enough to witness you. I've watched how those spaces change people, how being seen resets what feels normal, how availability becomes contagious. One person sets a boundary, another gains courage. One person names a pattern, another recognizes their own. That's how cultural shifts begin. Not with slogans, but with small, repeated acts of emotional responsibility. With people choosing depth over convenience, reflection over repetition. And the broader implications are real. When emotional health improves, productivity steadies, homes become more secure, children learn that love doesn't require performance, communities gain citizens who can stay present through disagreement, who don't confuse detachment with strength. In a democracy, that matters, because disengaged hearts produce disengaged citizens. But people who know how to connect, who trust availability, participate, they listen, they build, they don't retreat at the first sign of discomfort. So if you're standing at that familiar crossroads again, wondering why the pattern keeps repeating, maybe this time the invitation is different. Maybe it's not asking you to try harder, but to choose differently. To ask not who you're attracting, but what you're ready to heal. I'm curious how this lands with you. Have you noticed a pattern you're beginning to understand, or a boundary you're learning to honor? Share it in the comments. Someone else may need to hear it. And if these reflections help you see your story more clearly, subscribe and stay with the conversation as we keep exploring what it means to build deeper, more honest connections together.